The night was still, the kind of silence that cloaked the world in an uneasy calm. Mary sat on her bed, a well-worn novel in her hands, its pages illuminated by the soft glow of her bedside lamp. The rhythmic chirping of crickets outside was the only sound accompanying her. She should have been asleep, but something gnawed at her, a mother's instinct that refused to let her rest. Then she heard it, a muffled sound from David's room, faint but distinct. Her heart quickened. Setting the book aside, she slipped her feet into her slippers and padded down the hall. As she neared her youngest son's room, the faint noise became clearer, like a low rustling. Pushing open the door, she froze. Her breath caught in her throat as her eyes widened in horror. Standing by David's bed were two tall, sinewy figures with ashen-gray skin that seemed to glisten unnaturally under the moonlight filtering through the window. Their faces were devoid of features save for deep-set, glowing eyes that exuded malice. One alien held David's gagged and tied form as if he were no more than a log of wood, while the other gestured sharply, communicating in a language she couldn't comprehend. A primal scream erupted from Mary's throat. "Let him go!" she shouted, her voice trembling with both terror and fury. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. She lunged at them, her hands clawing, her fists pounding with every ounce of strength she could muster. The aliens showed no reaction to her desperate attack. Their glowing eyes didn't even flicker, as if she were nothing more than an insignificant insect. "Let him go!" she cried again, her voice breaking. Her nails raked against the alien's unyielding skin as she fought to free her son. David's muffled cries only fueled her desperation. The alien holding David glanced at her briefly, its glowing eyes narrowing in a way that suggested only mild irritation at her defiance. Then it hissed a single, guttural sound. Without hesitation, the other alien responded. From its belt, it unsheathed a slender, cruelly sharp blade, its surface gleaming in the faint moonlight. Mary barely had time to react before the alien stepped forward with mechanical precision. In one fluid motion, it drove the blade deep into her throat. Her scream turned to a wet, choking gurgle as crimson blood gushed from the wound, staining her nightgown. Her hands instinctively flew to her neck, futilely trying to stem the flow, but the life was already leaving her. Her eyes remained wide, locked onto David's terrified gaze. Even as her body began to crumple to the floor, her expression remained, frozen in an agonizing mix of terror, love, and unyielding determination. She fell silently, her blood pooling beneath her, her trembling fingers still reaching toward her son. David's muffled cries grew more frantic, his eyes streaming with tears as he strained against his bindings. He called out to her through the gag, his voice desperate and broken, but she couldn't answer. The light in her gaze flickered, dimmed, and then extinguished entirely, leaving behind only the haunting reflection of a mother's final, selfless act of love. Nathan arrived just as the blade was pulled free, the metallic sheen of it catching the moonlight. He had been fixing the irrigation system in the fields, a late-night chore to ensure the crops received water. He hadn't expected to be gone long, but a faulty valve had delayed him. Now, as he stood in the doorway, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. The sight of her lifeless body sprawled on the floor, blood pooling beneath her, struck him like a physical blow. His legs buckled, and he slumped to the ground, his body trembling like a marionette whose strings had been cut. The aliens didn't even glance at him. They moved past him with cold indifference, their focus on their objective. To them, human life was meaningless, an obstacle to be removed without thought or care. One barked an order, its harsh voice grating, and the other continued carrying David toward the waiting ship outside. The aliens moved methodically down the hallway toward the exit, their movements precise and unhurried. As they passed into the dimly lit corridor, shadows seemed to ripple and shift. From the walls, 7 more aliens emerged, shedding their camouflage with an eerie, fluid motion. Their forms materialized one by one, bringing their total number to 9. They had been there all along, hidden in plain sight, their ambush meticulously planned. Nathan sat there, his mind unable to process what he had just seen. His hands trembled as he stared at his mother's still form, her eyes open and unseeing. A memory flashed through his mind, sharp and vivid, of that morning. "Nathan," she had teased as she worked in the kitchen, flipping steaks on the grill, "when are you going to marry that girl you like? You're 30 today, you know. It's about time you settled down." Her laughter had filled the room, warm and full of life. She'd set his plate in front of him, his favorite lunch, just as she always did on his birthday. "We're doing fine now," she'd said, a hint of pride in her voice. "Your father would be so proud of you." The memory shattered as his gaze returned to her lifeless body. Pain surged through him, so intense it felt like his chest might cave in. Tears blurred his vision, streaming down his face as his grief gave way to something darker. Something primal. The aliens didn't know it yet, but they had just unleashed something they couldn't possibly understand. In an instant, Nathan's expression shifted. Grief twisted into anger, a raw and searing rage that darkened his features. His eyes burned red, veins standing out on his temples as fury consumed him. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, his face went cold and emotionless, a blank mask hiding the storm within. Nathan rose from the floor with a deliberate, almost animalistic grace. His breathing was ragged, his eyes glowing with unrestrained fury. Silently, he closed the distance to the nearest alien. With a sudden burst of motion, he wrapped both hands around its neck, his fingers locking into a vice-like grip. The alien's eyes flickered momentarily, its body jerking in a futile attempt to resist. With a guttural roar, Nathan wrenched violently, twisting its head until a grotesque snap echoed through the corridor. The alien's body spasmed once before collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut. The other aliens turned, their indifferent demeanor dissolving into something disturbingly close to fear as they registered the brutal spectacle before them. The alien holding David initially froze, its glowing eyes narrowing as it registered the brutal display before it. A flicker of shock crossed its otherwise emotionless face, a fleeting acknowledgement of the unexpected threat. Then, regaining its composure, it emitted a guttural series of clicks and growls, a sharp command to the others. It was clear: no firearms. The risk of alarming the entire village was too great. Knives glinted menacingly in their hands as the aliens shifted into a predatory stance, their movements fluid, yet deliberate. With synchronized precision, they lunged at Nathan, blades poised to strike, their intent unmistakably lethal. The alien closest to Nathan swung its blade in a deadly arc, but Nathan sidestepped with an almost predatory grace. His movements were unnaturally fluid, as if driven by pure instinct. Grabbing the alien's arm mid-swing, he twisted it with such force that the joint snapped with a sickening crunch, eliciting a guttural howl from the creature. Nathan didn't pause. With a roar of his own, he forced the alien to the ground, his strength overpowering its struggles. Raising his boot high, he brought it down with bone-shattering force, crushing the alien's skull into the floor. The sound of cracking bone and splattering viscera echoed through the hall, a gruesome symphony of vengeance. The second and third alien moved in unison, their blades slicing through the air with lethal precision. Nathan's movements became a blur, evading their strikes effortlessly. In a fluid motion, he pivoted toward the third alien, slightly isolated from the others. His hand shot out, grabbing the alien's knife and spinning it back into its owner with brutal efficiency. With a feral snarl, Nathan plunged the blade deep into the alien's gut. The creature convulsed, its glowing eyes widening in shock. But Nathan wasn't finished. He ripped the blade upward, carving through sinew and bone, disemboweling the alien in a single savage motion. The alien crumpled to the floor, its entrails spilling out as Nathan turned his focus back to the remaining enemies, his rage unrelenting. The sight of such relentless brutality against their own was horrifying, even for the hardened invaders. The alien holding David hesitated, its glowing eyes briefly widening in what could only be interpreted as shock. It quickly recovered, its expression hardening as it barked an order in its guttural language, the tone unmistakable. "Take this human seriously." The command reverberated through the group, and they began to close ranks, forming a tight circle around Nathan. But Nathan was like a whirlwind, an unstoppable force of nature. His face betrayed no emotion, his eyes glowing an unholy red, promising only destruction. Nathan sidestepped to one side of the circle, his body a coiled spring of raw fury. Two nearby aliens lunged at him simultaneously, their knives slashing through the air in deadly arcs. Nathan's movements defied death itself. With a calculated kick, he struck one alien's leg, shattering its kneecaps and forcing it to collapse with a guttural screech. Seizing the moment, he wrenched the kneeling alien's arm, twisting it grotesquely until the knife it held was redirected. In a single, savage thrust, he drove the blade deep into the skull of the second alien, its lifeless body crumpling instantly. With brutal efficiency, Nathan pried the knife from the dying alien's weakening grip and, without hesitation, drove it into the ribs of the kneeling alien, the blade sinking deep until it pierced its heart. Blood gushed in torrents as the creature convulsed, its grotesque form collapsing into a lifeless heap at Nathan's feet. Both aliens collapsed in grotesque unison, their bodies twitching briefly before going still, leaving a crimson-streaked testament to Nathan's fury. Now the commanding alien became desperate, its facade of cold calculation shattering into raw panic. Its glowing eyes widened in an expression of primal fear. The arrogance of a superior predator dissolving in the face of something it could not comprehend. With a trembling hand, it flung David aside like discarded cargo, its movements no longer precise, but frantic and jerky, a stark contrast to the controlled demeanor it had maintained. The alien gestured wildly in its guttural language, the sharp, clipped sounds now tinged with desperation as it barked frantic commands. Its motions were erratic, almost pleading, as if urging its subordinates to unleash everything they had. Open fire, no longer concerned about stealth or even the consequences of alerting the village. The commanding alien's trembling fingers fumbled as it drew its pistol, the weapon shaking in its grip. For the first time, it hesitated, not from strategy, but from sheer terror, its glowing eyes flickering between Nathan and the weapon in its hand, as though it already knew the futility of its actions. But Nathan was already moving. The grief over his mother's death burned within him, fueling a terrifying speed and ferocity that seemed almost otherworldly. The alien barely had time to aim before Nathan closed the distance, a force of nature unstoppable and unrelenting, an embodiment of their worst nightmare. The other aliens hesitated, their movements no longer measured and confident, but twitchy, uncertain. One alien, slower to react as it fumbled to switch from its knife to its rifle, sealed its fate in those precious wasted seconds. Nathan seized the opportunity with ruthless precision, closing the gap between them in a heartbeat. His knife flashed in the dim light as he gripped the alien by its neck, slamming it back into the wall with bone-crushing force. Without pause, he drove the blade into the alien's midsection, twisting it savagely to ensure maximum damage. The alien's glowing eyes dimmed as it slumped forward. But Nathan wasn't done. With unrelenting fury, he seized its head and twisted violently, the sickening crack of its breaking neck echoing through the hallway. He hurled the lifeless body at the alien who had almost aimed its rifle at him, the weight and force of the corpse knocking the weapon aside and sending the shooter sprawling. The grotesque display halted any further aggression momentarily, as the others recoiled in stunned disbelief. The commanding alien hesitated, its pistol shaking slightly as it realized the true horror of what it faced. The commanding alien, its hands trembling, fired at Nathan, but missed entirely, the shot going wide in its panic. The other alien aimed its rifle, opening fire with a burst of deadly plasma. Nathan reacted with inhuman swiftness, rolling forward and grabbing the sprawled alien's body to use as a shield. The rifle's plasma perforated its body, the alien's face contorting in agony as it was being riddled with shots. Unyielding, Nathan advanced, the alien body in his grip absorbing the relentless plasma barrage. Closing the distance with predatory precision, Nathan lunged forward, redirecting the rifle barrel, forcing it to aim at the alien commander. The plasma bolt struck the commander's pistol, knocking it from its grasp. With a calculated twist, Nathan wrenched the rifle from the shooter's hand and rammed the barrel into its stomach. The alien let out a guttural screech, but Nathan didn't stop. He opened fire at point-blank range, the plasma rounds ripping through the alien's abdomen. The relentless shots tore upward through its torso until its skull burst apart in a grotesque explosion. Nathan continued firing until the rifle overheated and clicked empty, leaving the alien a mangled, smoldering heap at his feet. Throughout, Nathan let out a frenzied, guttural cry, a sound of unbridled rage and anguish that echoed through the hallway like a primal force of nature, chilling the very air around him. The now disarmed alien commander, the last one still standing, trembled violently as Nathan approached. A viscous liquid pooled beneath its feet, a clear sign of its fear and desperation. It attempted to flee, but its trembling legs betrayed it, refusing to carry it away from the nightmare bearing down on it. Nathan closed in like a frenzied predator, his breath ragged and his eyes alight with an unholy fury. With a guttural roar, he pounced on the alien, tackling it to the ground. His fists came down in a relentless barrage, each punch fueled by a primal mix of grief and rage. "Why did you kill her?" Nathan's voice cracked as he shouted, his words barely coherent between sobs. "Why my mother?" The alien's glowing eyes dimmed with each strike, its face deforming under the sheer force of Nathan's blows. Bones cracked, skin split, and viscous fluids mingled with blood, pooling around them. Its face caved in. Nathan's rage knew no bounds as he pounded the alien into an unrecognizable pulp of bone, brain, and flesh. At last, his fists slowed, the storm within him subsiding as exhaustion overtook him. His hands trembled, bloodied and raw, as he slumped back, his chest heaving with ragged breaths. The corridor fell silent once more, save for the faint echo of his cries. The last of the invaders was dead, their bodies strewn about in brutal disarray. Nathan stood alone in the center of the carnage. His chest heaved, his body covered in blood. His eyes, once filled with pain and grief, now burned with a cold, dark fury. His mind was consumed with the memory of his mother's death, the sight of his brother being dragged away, and the violence he had unleashed in response. His gaze shifted to where David lay bound and gagged. The sight of his younger brother, trembling and terrified, stirred something deep within him, a flicker of the protective instinct that had driven him this far. He stumbled forward, his bloodied hands trembling as he reached David. With a ferocity born of desperation, he tore at the bindings, his fingers slick with alien blood making the task all the more difficult. "I've got you, David," he murmured, his voice hoarse and uneven. "You're safe now." The ropes finally gave way, and Nathan pulled his brother into a tight embrace. David sobbed against his chest, his small frame shaking as the weight of the ordeal hit him. Nathan held him close, his body still trembling with adrenaline, but his focus now solely on the boy in his arms. High in the night sky, the alien mothership watched in real time through the body cam of their fallen comrade. The transmission displayed a nightmare etched in blood and fury. The horrifying screams of their squad, the grotesque crack of bones shattering under unrelenting force, skull caving, and the relentless primal savagery of the human they had dared to provoke. The observation deck fell into an oppressive silence. Rows of glowing alien eyes locked onto the screen, their usual cold confidence replaced by an unspoken dread. Some shifted uncomfortably, their elongated fingers twitching involuntarily. Others stood frozen, their mouths slightly open, as if to speak but unable to find words. The terror was palpable, etched into every flicker of their expressions. They exchanged glances, their silent communication betraying their shared realization. This was no ordinary human. What they had dismissed as an inferior species was now a vision of death itself, tearing through their ranks with impossible ferocity. One alien reached instinctively for the console, as if to stop the feed, but hesitated. No one could look away. One by one, their gazes shifted from the screen to each other. In their language, no words were needed. The message was clear in their wide, horrified eyes and the involuntary tightening of their bodies. The plan to invade had unraveled, crushed under the weight of the horror they had just witnessed.